And the reason is that you've got to centralize power if you want to get more and more control in the hands of the few over more and more people. One of the coordinates, one of the methods of manipulation, a massively important one to understand, is one I've dubbed problem, reaction, solution, where you want to change society in a way that if you do it openly, you'll get resistance, massive resistance from the population. So what you do is you create a problem covertly, you blame someone or something else for it, you pass that fake version of the event through the unquestioning, pathetic mainstream media to the people, unquestioned overwhelmingly and certainly uninvestigated, and you want the people to react to the manufactured problem with outrage, with fear, and you want them to say, do something. What are they going to do about it? At which point you then offer solutions openly with changes in legislation and society and its structure to advance your agenda. And because of the problem, reaction, solution, you do not get the resistance here that you would have got without the manufactured problem. Another way of describing this is ordo ab chaos, the Latin motto of the 33rd degree of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry: order out of chaos. Problem, reaction, solution. Create the chaos, then offer the order, your change out of that chaos. You want to change society, so you create a massive problem. As a result of that problem, you offer the solution, all there, written and ready, the Patriot Act in America and around the world, their versions of it, to change society. But when through the web you control the intelligence agencies, you control the governments, you control the media, and you control countries, then you've got all the pieces you need to orchestrate the problem, reaction, solution, and to then use this to change society in the image that you have desired. Then there's another version, which I now call no problem, reaction, solution. This is when you don't need a real problem, you just need the public perception of a problem, and then you can offer a solution to a problem that doesn't actually exist, but if enough people think it does, well, you got them. Totalitarian tiptoe, as I call it, goes in conjunction with problem, reaction, solution. This is real simple. You start at A, you know you're going to Z, but you know if you go in a big leap, the change is going to be so big and so quick that people are going to go, what's happening? What's happening? Turn that television show off. What's happening? And so you go in steps, as big as you can get away with, but not so big that you get too much of a reaction. And as this quite rightly said, you really think it would be this obvious. Well, it's becoming that obvious now as we move along, but up to this point it hasn't been, unless you looked for it. The European Union was turned from a free trade zone, nothing to worry about, just for jobs, into what it is now, a centralized dictatorship, through the totalitarian tiptoe. And globalization, which is the constant centralization of power, which is more and more power in the hands of fewer and fewer over more and more people, this is a totalitarian tiptoe. More and more, the globalized economy is taking over, so that every country is dependent on every other country, therefore has no power of individual action and individual decision-making. Free trade, which means freedom to exploit, which means you can get sweatshop workers here to make your stuff for a few cents, and then you ship it over here and you sell it for as much as you can get. It's called free trade. Everyone's in favor of free trade. You can't be against free trade. This is also part of this globalized centralization of power, which is designed to do this, and it increasingly is doing this. It means that if you're dependent within your country or your community on things outside of your influence, then everyone is dependent on everyone else, therefore has no self-sufficient ability to make decisions in their own lives and their own communities and their own countries. And the reason that they want to do this is they want to make everyone dependent on something outside their control, because dependency equals control. It's like abundance and scarcity. We live in a world which could be incredibly abundant. Nobody should be hungry on this planet, for goodness sake. Africa could feed the bloody world. It can't even feed itself. Why? Because of the manipulation of that continent. And so we have all over the world, because there's no empathy, no consequences for them emotionally of their actions, we have manufactured scarcity, because abundance equals choice equals freedom. Scarcity equals dependency equals control. And that's why we have manufactured dependency. We have people hungry in a world of plenty. Coordinate 3, the cement. There are certain organizations, networks, rings, that act as the cement that holds the web together and holds people within the web together. But they, through these various cements, control all these different and various apparently unconnected organizations. Now, one of the cements, of course, is the secret society network. That's pretty obvious when you look at it.
Very obvious that the inflation rate is not 7%, it's much higher than that, in that it costs more than 7% to live here than it did last year. Why is this not on the front page of every publication?
Well, because the government, Wall Street, the Federal Reserve has a vested interest in the public not understanding how bad inflation is. In fact, one of the ways the Fed's been able to justify creating more inflation is because they claimed we didn't have enough of it.
We have disruptions to the supply chain, not just domestically, but globally. But the reason that there is inflation creeping into the system now is we have been pouring money from a helicopter into the economy since the beginning of the pandemic. All the stimulus programs, all the relief programs. We now know at least $1 trillion plus for infrastructure, don't yet know on the social bill. But all of these are very, very liquid events. In other words, pouring money into the system eventually gets into the hands of consumers and they start buying goods and services. Now here's where it gets complicated. The goods and services they want are stuck on a ship outside of the port of Los Angeles for sometimes up to 6 weeks. That problem, while the president has tried to solve it, has not been solved yet. Companies that make things like cars that used to rely on parts that were inexpensive from the Asian market can't get them anymore, and they try and source them domestically at sometimes 30, 40, 50% higher prices. That goes into the product, it raises the prices, and there you have inflation. Now, if you believe the supply chain is going to get repaired, those pressures should come off. My own opinion is that half of the inflation is coming from supply chain issues, and the other half, which is not transitory, which is more permanent, is coming from the fact that consumers are flush with cash and want goods and services like they did pre-pandemic.
The people who destroyed the US dollar seem to be getting away with it. How is that?
Yeah, well, they just renominated Powell to a second term, as if he did such a great job on his first term. It's a complete disaster. Of course, they might have replaced him with somebody even worse, but this is the only way the government can finance all the spending. You have the Democrats now promising all sorts of stuff for nothing. We're going to get free preschool. Everyone's going to get paid family and medical leave, and no one's going to have to pay for it. Nobody's taxes are going up. We're paying for it through inflation because the money to pay for all this government is being printed into existence, and then it's spent into circulation. And as it's spent into circulation, it's driving up prices. And when Jim Cramer was talking about all the money we're spending, yeah, the problem is we're not earning it, we're printing it, and then prices are going up. Our productivity is collapsing. We just got the worst productivity numbers in 62 years in this country. Our trade deficits are exploding. The economy is imploding. It is a mess. We just can't see it because we're blinded by all the inflation.
Remember, we paid many people not to work, and those programs are just coming off now. September was when some of the checks stopped. So companies that were trying to hire workers, particularly in the restaurant and service industries, were fighting against the government. It was kind of a strange program. Work for the government, do nothing, or work for business. So hopefully that's going to stop. That's number one. But number two, and you may find this statistic rather remarkable, most companies, including mine, tried to determine last December, what number of employees were not going to come back to the office. And we made the assumption, along with many other companies in the S&P, that that would be about 15% of the employees. Those that were in accounting, logistics, and compliance, that used to sit in cubicles, wouldn't come back. Well, now I have the data, at least from my companies, and there are a broad swath of companies, probably 10,000 people included in the supply chains for these companies. 55% are not coming back to the office, more than half, not now, not ever. And as a result of that, they've moved to places where they can stay with their families, take care of elderly parents. They've left the city completely. They're never coming back to the office. And as a result, they won't work inside the cities anymore in their little cubicles at the desk because they've proven to the economy they can do it remotely using the technology we already talked about. So this has put a lot of pressure on the traditional job markets. The head of my own accounting in my operating company that oversees all of our investments said to me, I grew up on a farm. I'm going back to a farm. I'm going to live on the farm, and I'm never coming into the office. If you don't like it, I'm going to work for somebody else. Think about that. That's exactly what's going on everywhere. The demand equation is insatiable. It's like it was in the 60s, and we have a remarkable situation where the underlying economy is very, very strong. And so the Fed is saying to itself, and they're a very tricky situation, their mandate is to watch for inflation, and they're starting to see it, and they just don't know how much of it is transitory. You've heard that word many times now over the last few weeks. So transitory would mean no problem. As soon as supply chain gets better, these inflationary forces go away and we can stop raising rates, but they don't know that yet. So they've cleared that option, and the market assumes that's going to happen.
Greetings world. We are anonymous. We are so desperately requesting your help. Oh, isn't it you? We do not have a lot of time left. Thank you for standing up for world peace and positivity.